Before we get started on today's episode, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Cork, the Conference on Osteopathic Research and Knowledge, which is coming to the West Coast for the first time September 9th through 10th, 2026 at UC San Diego's Scripps Seaside Forum. All the OMM leaders will be there, and after 2 successful years on the East Coast at NYIT, it has moved. CME credit and scholarship will be available. You can find the conference at cih.ucsd.edu/Cork-2026. This is not a sponsored advertisement. This is just an advocacy for the profession.
My name is Dr. Ian Storch. I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist and osteopathic physician, and you are listening to Do or Do Not. If you're interested in joining our team or have suggestions or comments, please contact us at doordonotpodcast.com. Share our link with your friends and like us on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Today we have an exciting episode of Do or Do Not. We're interviewing Dr. Nicholas Salupo, DO, a practicing nephrologist, and possibly the smartest guy in the room. He'll share with us his journey into medicine, how he became an osteopathic physician, and, most importantly, his involvement in the American Osteopathic Association's Information Association. He'll talk to us about their work on a platform called the Emerging DO, where DOs can meet, talk, and help each other in the journey through medicine. This is a do not miss. Nick Salupo, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
All right, Nick. So I'm just going to start with a little introduction and then we're going to chat. So the reason we have you today is because a representative from the AOIA called me and asked if we could interview you to talk a little bit about the organization and some new technological advances that they're working on. So we're going to get there. But to start, you are a nephrology fellow.
I am now a full-fledged board-certified nephrologist in practice.
Wow, so, I apologize.
Yeah,
oh,
no, all good.
Awesome.
So yeah, those training days are behind me.
How long have you been practicing?
8 months. So I just finished fellowship in the last year. Yeah, brand new.
Amazing.
So, yes, mostly have my sea legs under me, but definitely still working through starting in practice.
And now for those listeners that everybody should know what a nephrologist is, but let's say they don't know. What is a nephrologist? How would you explain that to like your cousin when they're like, what the heck is that?
So I tell everybody that I'm Nick the kidney doctor. So if it has anything to do with the kidneys, I usually can get dragged into it. So for our listeners that may have more of a medical background, everything from hypertension to glomerulonephritis, to kidney injuries, to chronic kidney disease and dialysis management. I do a little bit of everything. I'm in a private practice in Dayton, Ohio, so I get run all over the place to hospitals, to clinics, to dialysis units, to rehabs. I get some continuity of care with my patients, which is great. And then in the hospital, I get some people with an acute reversible problem that never have to see me again, which is even better. So yeah, I do a little bit of everything.
That's amazing. Now, I have a tough question. Now, when you're looking at, I'm a gastroenterologist. I did internal medicine and GI, and I hate to say it, but I think the gastroenterologists were kind of like plumbers. We do have a little academic, but when people ask me, like, who are the smartest internal medicine subspecialists, I always come up with either infectious disease or nephrology. What would you say to that? Which one?
So I'm flattered that you would say something like that. I consider infectious disease, endocrinology, rheumatology, and nephrology as kind of the forgotten stepchildren of the medical subspecialties. And so we get to kind of band together, and I'd say that we can be the brain trust for you.
Right. Awesome. And then,
but if you need to know what's going on with the patient, read the infectious disease note. They have everything.
right? I mean, I'm not going off by saying nephrology and putting you in a basket with ID. That's not insulting to you.
Not at all. I'm honored.
All right, Nick. So we're going to come back to your choices in a minute. All right, Nick. So tell us about the AOIA, what it stands for, what the organization does, and how you got involved.
Yeah, so the AOIA sounds a lot like the AOA because it's an arm of the AOA. And so it's the American Osteopathic Information Association. And so anyone that's renewed an AOA membership recently, there's a little box that says, for free, can I please be an AOIA member as well? And I think it's automatically clicked even. So every AOA member is automatically an AOIA member. And the AOIA mission really is to be the innovation arm of the AOA. And so I got involved actually as an Ohio Osteopathic Association representative to the emerging DO platform. So I've gotten to work with the AOIA, and it's a crucible of ideas for the 21st century DO. It's how do we use technology, how do we use information to better serve AOA members? So in that respect, it's really cool because it's kind of an open horizon that if we identify a problem for DOs, the AOIA can rise up to find a solution for that.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, so you mentioned the emerging DO platform and that you were sort of recruited for this. And when I spoke to the representative from the AOIA, that's really what they wanted us to highlight. So can you tell us what inspired the creation of this platform and what is it?
Great question, and it's new. So if you've never heard of this website platform, that's no surprise. So for some of the younger students and residents that may not have lived through the single accreditation merger, we're kind of at this interesting new place as DOs. We've been fighting for over 100 years for parity in practice rights and equality in the House of Medicine. And I think we're the closest we've ever been to getting there, but that puts new DOs in practice in an interesting place. We now are in ACGME training programs. The AOA is navigating a new way to serve its members. And so with this new system, we were looking around going, well, where's the place that we can still have this distinctly osteopathic identity, osteopathic conversation, and what can be our digital home? Because there's plenty of information on the internet, and who knows if it's accurate or not. This is the AOA and the AOIA rising up to make that digital home for DOs.
The platform focuses on the osteopathic community. Can we just have like a Reddit forum? Why do we need this whole platform? And what can DOs in practice, in training, students, what can they do on the platform?
The beautiful thing about the internet, and for those of us old enough to remember the early internet where we had those chat rooms, we had that sense of community. This is built for DOs by DOs. So Reddit is there. People are posting on it. There's opinions, and the anonymous nature of certain chat rooms has its pros and cons. But here is the AOA. Here is the DO profession making a community, making a space for conversation. And so we're talking about chat rooms and things, but this is way more than just that. There's a whole part of the platform covering residencies. And so this takes maybe a first or second year osteopathic medical student and puts them in the same place as a program director or a program coordinator. There's all kinds of conversations happening in kind of the doctor's lounge is what we call it. There's a whole mentorship program. So maybe you're a place that doesn't have a specialist in the specialty you're interested in going into. You can connect with anybody. I got assigned to an osteopathic student in Arizona. And so I'm in Dayton, Ohio. It just opens up a place for conversation and a place for accurate information that right on Reddit, you don't know who it is and you don't know what their source is. This is straight from our mouths and you have your picture attached to it. So if I say something and you have a question about it, you can find me and really facilitate the relationships and the community in an osteopathic medical profession.
Amazing. That sounds absolutely amazing. So kind of stepping off of that, I think a lot of questions, we're talking about medical students, is finding information, especially as you said, since the ACGME merger about residencies, maybe what residencies are good, what residencies are not good, what residencies are DO friendly, maybe what residencies have AOA accreditation. Is that kind of what the platform could be used for?
That is absolutely what the platform can be used for. As we were building it out, and like I said, I was on the planning committee for this, so I beta tested it. I've gone through the phone interviews, opinion surveys, and I feel like those of us that have helped develop this have done it from a place of what could I have used back when I was making these decisions and these conversations. And I think that really is a testament to the AOIA making this is it's still new. We're still changing this. So if something comes up, we can change it. Like I said, this is the innovation arm of our organization. We're here to be nimble and make changes to serve DOs. But the residency insights section from the very beginning has been a core pillar of this platform. And so you want to know if it has osteopathic recognition, boom, you can search by list. There's a residency comparison feature where you can put two residencies side by side. There's information on the PGY1 average salary. There's contact information. I mean, this is the AOA went through and found all of the programs and put them in one spot. So you don't have to deal with an outdated website from a program. You don't have to track all this stuff down. You just you go to emergingdo.org, you click residency insights, and you search the program, and it's all in one spot.
That sounds amazing. But now I assume they don't have every residency. Is this a work in progress? It's being built. Like, let's say a lot of DO students, they think like emergency medicine. So let's say they were looking at an ER place. I would assume every ER program is not going to be in there. Is that right? Or
well, so here, let's just do it. I've got it pulled up right now. So I'm going to search emergency medicine programs in New York. I can search rural, suburban, or urban. So let's say you want an urban New York EM program. And then I am not going to click the osteopathic recognition box to narrow my search, but I could. And let's see, give me 2 seconds. And it's returned 32 different programs with those search criteria. So I've got Albany Medical Center, I've got Brooklyn Hospital, and Icon, Mount Sinai. This is all the programs, and it's all right there.
Amazing. Let's test the system a little bit. So just if I was doing ER and I'm not, there are lots of great ER programs. The most listened to episode on our podcast of all time is Dr. Matt Nelson, who's an amazing DO attending at Northwell Manhasset ER program. Can you see does that come up?
So is it a Zucker?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So I just typed in Northwell Emergency Medicine in New York, and I get the Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell South Shore, Staten Island, and it looks like maybe like a main program.
Yeah, click on the main program.
Yeah. And so we'll pull that up. Currently, there are 3 followers, so you can follow a program. So if they post anything, you know it straight from their mouth. And so residency data here. So percent of applicants invited to interview by applicant type. So DOs make up 43% of the individuals invited to interview. Number of residents who were US DO graduates. So of the program graduates, are they 36% DO? It gives you the ACGME residency program code to look them up. They do not have a minimum level 2 COMLEX score required for interview. The entering year salary, $80,465. A location type, it lists osteopathic recognition, the accreditation status, and it has the website link. Total number of residents, 71. And then there's a message board that no one's posted on yet, but it has all that information right there. I'm not familiar with the program, so I didn't know how to spell it, but it took us 3 minutes to get all this information. You're not tracking stuff down. It's all right here. And this is open to anybody. So you're a first-year student and you're thinking, oh, well, maybe I want to be somewhere in New York. Maybe I want to be somewhere in California. All the programs are right there.
Again, let's pivot a little bit and talk about it's definitely has value for students. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the value of this platform might be for docs in different stages of their career, like you who are early? I don't want to say I'm late, let's say mid-career, and then we could talk about late career. Like, is there value to this? Or is it really just for students?
you're at the peak of your career.
Love
I think
it.
is
Love
how
it.
you
We're
say
friends,
that.
Nick. Yeah, we're good friends.
Yeah, this is a community. And one of the cool things about it is you can call it multi-generational if you want. Where can you go and bump into medical students? And so I think that's an important thing, that it keeps us on our feet, keeps us fresh as to what's the new stuff going on. And so maybe you want to get a little more involved in mentoring. We have the mentorship program, and so you can get paired with students. The Learning Career Center, so this is kind of building out the tools that DOs in practice need. There's a whole career resource section, so resume and CV tools. Maybe you're at a point where you're thinking about pivoting your career. There's contract negotiation services, right? Your AOA membership gives you stuff, and this is where those benefits pop up. There's job postings. Hold it up right here. Maybe you want to do outpatient pediatrics in Phoenix, Arizona. Boom, there it is with some highlights of the job. It takes all of us to practice, but maybe you're the complete opposite side of the spectrum. Here's a neurosurgeon with a focus on spinal surgery in Maryland, right? So it doesn't matter who you are. This isn't just for surgeons. This isn't just for outpatient primary care physicians. This is for all of us. And you just kind of hit the search function and you work through it. And let's say maybe you're not shifting focus, not looking at a different job or a new job. You're just starting out. We have the student loan professor resources. We have financial resources. We have information on starting a practice. We have a business of medicine curriculum. Play around with the site. You might go through it and say, you know, I know all that. Thanks. Stuff pops up. We have new features, new opportunities for AOA members, and here it all is in one spot. There is the AOIA Emerging DO Career Center. And so that's just how it can affect your day-to-day job. But then there's the whole chat room function. So you have a question. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm thinking about going here. I would like to talk more about this with somebody. You throw it out in the chat room. It's for a new platform that only has 800 users. There's probably 2 or 3 posts a day, and you can set up a function to kind of blast you in the morning to your email, an update of all the new posts. So you can filter. And so I could go on and on. There's a ton of stuff here that maybe it's on Reddit, maybe it's on Facebook, maybe it's on whatever social media platform you want. This was the AOA and AOIA saying, let's put it all in one spot, and here it is for you. It's verified information by us for you.
Let me just ask you this, and again, no negative toward anybody else, but I wrote a piece last year for the DO magazine called The Secret Handshake, and I kind of talk a little bit about the fact that although there are, of course, you know, people always talk about challenges of being a DO, but one of the highlights of being a DO, for me at least, and I'm sure for you as well as you're involved in this, is like having that connection with other DOs that maybe other people, bigger medical community don't have. Does the AMA have something like this, or is this really just the innovation from the AOA?
I'm not familiar with what the AMA may have in regards to platforms like this. And like you said, not to put anyone down, some of my best friends are MDs, my partners are MDs, so many of my colleagues are MDs. But being a DO in the 21st century is a unique thing. And I remember the DO handshake, and we're kind of talking to osteopathic physician specialists. DOs are everywhere. We do everything. And regardless of whether you do OMT every day in the hospital in your clinic, you probably are thinking about things differently. And I've gotten into this with some of my MD friends, and you say something about structure or function or some of these things that may even become jokes among medical students. And they kind of look at you and they're like, what's that have to do with anything? One of my mentors, he had a great story about a pulmonologist in the intensive care unit. They're on the ventilator, the patient is. And my mentor, he's doing some OMT on the patient, and the pulmonologist is like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, well, the ribs aren't moving well, so I'm trying to help him get off the vent with respiratory mechanics. And the pulmonologist goes, what do the ribs have to do with breathing? Right? And it's one of those, like, that's what, day 3 of osteopathic medical school. So whether you're doing OMT, you are a DO. And I can say this as somebody that recent fellowship training and things larger than any one of us, I've had to step away from the DO roots. I did not go to a traditionally AOA fellowship program. And so there's those of us out there that I'd say, hey, if you want to come back to your osteopathic family, here's the website for you. Here's the people doing it. And one of the reasons I love this podcast and that you're hosting it is, like I said, DOs go everywhere, but you can't use the excuse that, oh, well, I'm a subspecialist, I don't do that. There's those of us out here doing it. And I'm sure in your GI practice, my nephrology practice, I'm thinking about the whole person. I'm thinking about interconnected systems. I'm thinking about all of this stuff. And it may or may not affect what I actually prescribe. But yeah, I'm super proud to be a DO. And here's a place for us to kind of communicate those things and address the problems that do pop up for those of us that are in this single accreditation system or whatever. DOs have always had to deal with something, and what that something is always changes. But we're stronger together, and this brings us into one spot to do that.
It all sounds great, obviously, but on the difficulty side, what challenges, if any, did the advisory panel face when they were developing the platform? Were there hiccups or speed bumps or issues?
This has gone very smooth, and obviously I'm biased. I'm not going to say there was a major problem, even if there was. No, this was all very smooth. This is about 2.5 years in the making, 2 years in the making, and we've been meeting. I think it's usually every 2 or 3 months, but we built it brick by brick, and there was lots of focus sessions with attending physicians at various stages in their career, resident physicians, osteopathic medical students. And I think probably the most robust conversation was, what pillars of this program do we actually settle on? And is this going to be what best serves our members? Or is this going to just be a web page that collects cobwebs? And so those 4 kind of pillars, the Learning and Career Center, the mentorship program, the doctor's lounge chat function, and the residency insights, we felt that was the best served the wide variety of members. And then we built it out. We played around with it. I have left feedback on my residency. We said, well, include this information, don't include that information. So no, it's actually been quite smooth, and every addition has undergone pretty rigorous review from a large amount of specialties and individuals at various stages of training, and we're all across the country. So think about however you would describe yourself. There was probably somebody that represents you on this group helping make this thing.
Just to kind of finish up, I have a suggestion also. So I guess the first thing is, have users suggested anything that's been implemented? That would be my first question, and I have a suggestion. And my second thought is, do you see additions to this platform in the future that would be helpful? Of course, on top of increasing membership, which you've just gone up to, you said 800, it'll be 801 after we finish this conversation, because I'm going to sign up.
Love to hear it. Yeah. So yeah, Carrie Simon at the AOA and AOIA has kind of spearheaded this whole platform, and she's super available. And she has come to our meetings and said, we've gotten feedback on the compare a residency feature. We've gotten feedback on the chat room. And then we built a website from scratch. We built a whole digital community from scratch. There have been broken links. There have been pages that don't refresh when you put the information in. There's been what I consider little stuff, but usually it's someone sends a message in and says, hey, this isn't working for me. And I think that just underscores our community. We all have to participate in our community. We have to be good citizens of the osteopathic medical profession. And something pops up and you just tell us and we go, oh, okay, yeah. Let's, again, this nimble arm that has the ability to change these things. And if it's not working for us, let's find a better way forward. And so I think one of the coolest things that we're trialing right now, and actually over the last couple of weeks, we've been training our osteopathic medicine AI agent. And so its name is Dora. So the emerging DO platform is soon to have, probably this summer, we will roll out the first ever osteopathic medicine AI. And as I was training it, started simple. What is a DO? Who is Andrew Taylor Still? Right, let's test the waters. And by the end of my training this agent, I was asking it for specific AOA bylaws from certain years. It is trained on AOA data. And so you want to ask Dora, which program has a higher salary, which program has more PTO, which program has whatever. Again, I go back to, is your information on the internet valid? And you can't trust everything you see online. So here is something that DOs and the AOA and the AOIA have specifically trained to make sure you get the best information possible so you can practice the best way you choose. And so that's going to be super cool. I'm not sure what to expect from it, but by the end, because I was like just going to train it for 5 or 10 minutes in between patients or something. And I got hooked, and I was like, actually, no, I'm learning stuff from this. And so it's going to be super cool once we've pushed it as far as it can go.
So my little comment is, just based on our prior discussion with the residencies, I'd love to be able to ask Dora, can you show me all of the ER residencies that have a DO program director, or, something like that, where there's DOs that are actually in the DNA of the program, because that would make me feel warm and fuzzy maybe about applying to that program. I don't know if that's that's been looked at for the future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to bear with me, I'm pulling my Dora training up right now. So let's see. Your question was
emergency medicine programs in New York that have a DO as the program director.
So we're giving it a couple seconds. I've asked Dora, can you make a list of emergency medicine residencies in New York with a DO program director? And Dora was up front. I'm sorry, but I can't make that list reliably from the information I have. So it's not going to hallucinate. It's not going to give you bad information. But Dora comes back and says, I do have information on several emergency medicine residencies in New York. It does not include whether the program director is a DO. So it recognizes its limitations of what it's trained on, and that information may not be out there for it to find, but it then quickly redirects and it says, but if you'd like, I can give you a list of programs based off percentage of DO residents, interview invite rate for DO applicants, some of that same information that was in the residency center. And so it recognizes its limits, and who knows, as we continue to build this and make the list and that information is available, then maybe you can in the future use those search criteria.
Awesome. All right, Nick, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I'm going to now sort of switch gears, as we say, and talk about you. Tell us, Nick, where did you grow up? Where did you go to college? When did you decide you wanted to be a doctor? And when did you discover osteopathic medicine?
So just my whole life story, no problem.
That's it.
So born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I consider myself one of the lucky folks that just always knew I wanted to be a doctor. When I was younger, my mom's a nurse and my dad's a chemical engineer, and he worked on some pharmaceutical development stuff. So that was kind of just always our house, that my dad was tinkering with stuff and trying to figure out how things work. And then my mom was always trying to help people and get them to feel better. So medicine was a natural calling. It was either that or being an engineer. And turns out I don't speak calculus. So once you start adding letters in between the numbers, I check out. So engineering was not for me, but I consider myself an engineer of the human body, and you don't need calculus as a prereq to get to that, or at least not complicated calculus. And so ended up going to a small school in northern Indiana. It was Manchester College when I went. It is now Manchester University. I went from a high school of about 3,200 students to a college of about 1,200 students. And that was record enrollment at the time. So by the time I graduated, I think my biochemistry class in college was 13 students. I had one class, an English course, and there were, I think, 7 or 8 of us. And there was one morning that I think it was an 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock lecture. And so we were all hungry. I just brought a whole griddle to class and I just made pancakes while the teacher lectured. So, I mean, it was this robust academic environment where it was like, you know what, we're here to take ideas, work with the ideas, and learning was really the heart of all of that, and making sure that we better people through our education. And the motto of the school was respecting the infinite worth of the individual. And that really guided my path into medicine. I mean, thinking about how to take care of people and respecting them so they can live the life they want. So with that, I knew I had always wanted to be a doctor. I was good enough at science to have the opportunity to do that. I applied to medical schools straight out of college. And to this day, I have still not heard back from some of those interviews. My interview at Marian University was actually the only interview to any medical school I got. And I applied only because it was in Indiana. So I actually had explicit advice from my undergrad advisors to not apply to DO schools. I had not ever met a DO. My family physician, my pediatrician, my sports medicine docs growing up, none of them were DOs. I think it's fair to say I had no idea what a DO was when I applied to DO school. So I'm quite blunt about that. I ended up at a DO school because they were the only ones that offered me a spot. And I am so thankful for that. I mean, that changed the entire course of my life and showed me how great it is to be a DO. And so even then I got in and it was just kind of like okay, OMT and OPP are just classes I have to take, I guess. But through a fluke cancellation, we actually had somebody offer financial support to go to the American Academy of Osteopathy's convocation my first year of med school. And so somebody else backed out and they said last minute, you got to buy a flight to Colorado Springs, but everything else is covered. Your room, your everything. And I didn't have spring break plans that year. So I said, sure, I'll buy a flight to Colorado. I like Colorado. And it was really there watching people apply the osteopathic principles, talk about some more complicated OMT principles that I fell in love, and I went off the deep end. I drank the Kool-Aid, whatever metaphor you want to use. And from that point on, I said, I have to know everything I possibly can about this. And so here I am.
What made you decide on internal medicine as a specialty, and what was your application like to residency?
Internal medicine was a good blend of continuity of care, acutely ill patients, and then ultimately what drew me to nephrology, kind of these more cerebral problems, walking through problems that don't have a clear guideline. We have a couple studies on this rare disease, and we have some older medicines, we have some brand new medicines. How do you blend all that and really get into to sit down and flex my thinking is kind of what brought me into internal medicine. I enjoyed the procedure part through residency. I ended up at Grandview Medical Center in Dayton, Ohio. Now it's Kettering Health Dayton. And it was old school AOA program that got osteopathic recognition through the single accreditation process. And so it's an osteopathic hospital. On the front door, it still says Grandview Osteopathic Hospital. And so I think not just internal medicine, but osteopathic internal medicine is really what to me in that sense. And so my application to it, it looked like a couple extracurriculars. Like I said, I got really involved with the AAO and went to convocation every year as a student. And I took a lot of extra courses. So those CME courses for OMT, they offer deep student discounts. And so I got to take some pretty advanced classes with some pretty skilled individuals just as a student. And so while that worked for me, that I probably should have spent a little more time studying for the actual classes in osteopathic medical school. So I was a completely average student and no 4.0 valedictorian stuff here, but I got to learn a lot of stuff I really enjoyed in medicine. And one of the things that I think a lot of students want to hear, and I'm here to say it, I'm sure some of their professors might disagree with me. You have to do what you like through medical school. And so I was racing marathons and actually got involved with a bicycle racing team. And so I raced bicycles. And so on the weekends, when I probably should have been studying, I was traveling all across the Midwest and getting into some pretty cool bike race stuff and met some amazing people. And so it worked for me. I got to do something that brought me a lot of joy and found some balance that I had my life, but I also had the medical school stuff also. So that's mostly what the application looked like.
All right. Awesome, Nick. And then spinning off of that, nephrology, how did you choose nephrology as specialty? And then how did the fellowship applications go?
So I did not a nephrology rotation in medical school. It was not until I was an intern that I did a nephrology rotation. And it was my first rotation. And it was about a week in, and I went, this is pretty cool. The people I get to meet are usually pretty nice. The problems we get to deal with are oftentimes complicated. And by the end of that month, I remember the attending I was working with And she was amazing and so thorough, one of the best physicians I've ever met. And so we were rounding at like 9 o'clock at night still, which is way too late to be rounding. But you couldn't leave. If she was on service, you couldn't just leave. And so we're wrapping up, and she goes, kind of our end of the rotation feedback. She goes, so what are you thinking? What do you want to do? And I told her that night, I go, I'm afraid I'm going to end up being a nephrologist. And she said, well, you are, but we'll see how long it takes you to realize that. And I was like, okay, fine. I'm going home. I'm going to sleep. And it just kind of was always this nagging thing in the back that I really thought I wanted to do critical care. And I just kept coming back to nephrology, kept coming back. I did an elective in it. So I did some extra stuff, and I went, you know what, let's do this thing. And so this is one of I think the best pearl I can give anybody is, if there's something you want to do, just ask. The worst anyone can say is no. And because my program was affiliated with Ohio University, we had an agreement with the Cleveland Clinic. And so on paper, my residency program was the same as the Cleveland Clinic. And I just had to fill out a piece of paper, and I got to do an away rotation as a resident during the application cycle at the Cleveland Clinic. And so a month-long clinical experience. And at the end of it, I walked into the program director's office after our little noon conference, and I said, hey, I'm Nick. I'm applying to your program, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, oh, cool. When's your interview? And I was like, well, have you sent all your interviews out? And he's like, yeah, they went out last month. And I said, well, I didn't get one. And he said, ooh, that doesn't feel right. You came up here, you did all this work. And so they sat me down and gave me a chance, and I interviewed with all three program directors, and the rest is history. I matched there 2 months later, finished my fellowship, and it could not have been a better experience. So all that happened because I asked, hey, can I go to the Cleveland Clinic for a rotation? And then I just asked, hey, can I have an interview? Everyone could have told me no, but they didn't. And so now we're here. So yeah, nephrology, kind of osteopathic medicine, I kind of stumbled into and went, well, I like a lot of this stuff. I seem to be pretty good at it. Let's do it. And I couldn't be happier.
All right, Nick. First of all, that is a tremendous story. Second of all, without you commenting on this, just for our listeners, you have been very humble throughout this whole interview about your academics, about your admission into medical school. But at the end of the day, to me, as I mentioned at the beginning of this interview, a nephrologist is typically the smartest person in the room, and a DO Cleveland Clinic trained nephrologist, which you are, being as humble as you are, is very impressive to me. And I appreciate everything that you've said, but I don't believe that you are not the smartest person in the room. And right now it's just the two of us, so that's easy. But if it was a bigger room, I would still probably say the same.
Well, I mean, if you want to include this or not, I mean, for students, I don't say this to brag, but I am the bottom of my class. I joke, what do you call the person that graduates last from medical school? And everyone goes, oh, a doctor. And I say, no, you call him Nick Salupo. Mm-hmm. And there's two very clear ways to be intelligent. And some of our peers are great at taking tests, and they excel in medical school. I told you about my undergrad experience. I had whole finals that were oral dissertations, long form handwritten essays. That's not medical school. And so medical school was the first time where someone said, you have to pick A, B, C, or D. That's it. We're giving you no information. And do you remember it or not? And my brain doesn't work that way. I think some of the best osteopathic physicians I've met, their brains don't work that way. I mean, and that's our claim to fame, right? We talk about complicated, interconnected systems. You can't reduce some of this stuff all the way down. So I flattered that you say that. I appreciate it. It's been a humbling experience through the process, but again, nothing else I'd rather be than a DO nephrologist. And I hope everybody finds that path for them. I don't think everybody wants to be a DO nephrologist, but if you're the cardiologist, if you're the pediatrician, God, I mean, I picked my pediatrician specifically because she was a DO. It takes all of us. And I just hope that everybody finds their spot through all that. And maybe my path is helpful for some people. And if it's not, then maybe it's an example of what not to do.
All right, Nick. Again, appreciate all that. I have two last questions. Usually we for some advice. I think you've given that to us already, and I appreciate that you jump-started that piece. Neither of these are loaded, but just things that came up as I was thinking about your story. Are you still doing OMM? And is there OMM for nephrologists? Because people ask me about that for GI, and it's a little hard to find. But tell me what you think.
So for our listeners, this was not a plant. That question did just happen organically. There are some abdominal visceral manipulative techniques, but that is kind of the research question that I'm pushing forward. Newly in practice, getting my feet under me. I'm working with some of our librarian staff and some residents just to start with a literature review of what's out there. What trials do we have? And I think OMT literature is plagued by poor trial design, and it's a difficult hurdle to overcome. But that is something that I'm personally working on and want to contribute to our understanding of stuff. How does OMT affect blood pressure? Does it matter why your blood pressure is high? Do you see changes in GFR after manipulative techniques? And these problems are complex, multifactorial, and likely exponential. Like I said, I don't understand the calculus behind it, so stay tuned. But I think there is a very real place for manipulative techniques in the internal medicine subspecialties. As to whether I do OMT every day, most of the time I don't. I checked my schedule for next week. There's one day I have 23 patients. While I can understand it and I need somebody in my hospital and nearby in my community doing OMT, the problems that I handle on a day-to-day basis oftentimes are handled in a multidisciplinary manner. And at the moment, I'm the guy prescribing the medicines that correct the kidney dysfunctions. I'm thinking about it in that same structure and function. I gave a lecture yesterday to some allopathic residents, and I have little pictures of AT still in all of my nephrology slides. So anytime I talk about renal pathology, I go, well, has anyone ever heard of structure and function? The structure is messed up, so the function follows. So no, I'm not doing OMT, but I do my best to approach every patient osteopathically.
Awesome. So my last question, again, going away from the DO and something that's near and dear to my heart and that you mentioned at the beginning of the discussion is private practice. So you mentioned at the beginning when we first started talking that you're 8 months into working and that you're in private practice. Now, generally when you read online on Doximity or whatever platform, hopefully now people are looking at the AOIA platform, but like general platforms, people talk about the death of private practice. No one's going into private practice. Everybody's working for the hospital or for a big system. And you decided not to do that. So can you just in a couple of minutes, tell us why you decided to go into private practice and what you think the benefits are?
I think there's pros and cons to any way you want to set up your practice. But what I tell everybody, trainees, other physicians, and my patients, almost more than anybody, I tell my patients, my boss is the patient. If it is not serving my patients and my practice, we adjust. And so for some individuals, that level of responsibility and constant change is not how they want to practice. For others, I'd say the autonomy I have and my ability to adjust what I do to serve my practice and my patients, it's amazing. I mean, there's whole other ways to practice that a lot of people don't get exposure to because there aren't as many of us private practice folks around. And so, like, if a patient of mine shows up late, if a patient of mine has a problem, if there's scheduling issues, they come to me and ask. There is no rigid hospital network policy we have to follow. And it's like, well, what do we got to do to take care of this person? And when I'm in the hospital, I don't have someone breathing down my neck saying, you got to discharge. We need a bed. Those are all very real constraints in our medical system that we have to be aware of. But I get to say, first and foremost, if this does not serve my patient, if I am going to do bad medicine, I don't have to. My boss is a DO. I mean, and the people making decisions for how I practice are all physicians. And so it really puts the needs of the patient and the needs of the doctors first. And so that's the biggest thing that can't be understated. And that permeates into every part of our practice. Now, that does require more responsibility. I can't just zone out. If the trash in the office isn't getting taken out, guess who's wrapping it up and going out to the dumpster? Me. But like, right? That takes a community. If my office staff are having a problem, if anything comes up, they're calling me. And so sometimes you get called on your days off, but it makes your days on that much more meaningful. And in my group, we have some front office staff that have been there for 30 years, 25 years. And so this is a good place to be. You know who you're working with. And really, at the end of the day, you get to practice medicine the way you want. I think anybody that says it's impossible to start a private practice or it's not worth it, I don't think they're working with accurate information, or they've been sucked into the conspiracy that doctors should be employees. It works for a large amount of people, and there are times in our lives that it makes sense to be an employed physician, but don't be scared of private practice. There's plenty of us around, and I think almost all of us love exactly what we get to do and how we get to do it.
And I guess to sum it up, if you have questions about private practice, you might want to check out the Emerging DO platform, right? Maybe there's a forum for that.
Yeah, make a post and I'll be the first one to respond.
All right, Nick. Nick, this has been a great conversation. You're awesome. Platform sounds awesome. The AOIA is obviously awesome, and we appreciate your time.
I really appreciate the opportunity. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you to all of our listeners.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tian Yu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.